Folks, global warming is unremitting. Unremitting. Why don't they honestly tell us this truth? But we'll look outside and what do we see? Heavy snow, dangerous chunks of ice falling from tall buildings, and whiteout conditions on the roads. No, it's not global warming. It's another winter storm across the good old U.S. of A.
And once again, it's headed for New England, where lots of neighborhoods still haven't been able to dig out from the last blast of winter. Dale Hurd has the story.
It's the second part of a brutal 1-2 punch. Snow, ice, and wicked cold that just won't quit. It smashed through Denver Wednesday, causing more than 40 accidents during the morning commute. Just east of Nebraska, it caused whiteout conditions over the roads while dumping over a half-foot of snow. Minnesota saw 186 crashes in just 6 hours. And in New York, temperatures began to warm, and that led to dangerous chunks of falling ice from the World Trade Center. In the city of Chicago, they're still digging out from the last storm, and according to residents, not doing a very good job of it.
It's a mess, and it's a shame that it's still like this.
City plows are still trying to catch up after the first storm dumped nearly 20 inches on the city. Elsie Richardson needed all the help she could get.
I got stuck on this trip today once before. This is the second time in this one trip.
And in Boston, frustration is growing as the city struggles to clear the streets.
I'm a little dismayed that, they went and did spend some resources on cleaning up downtown as opposed to getting some of the other neighborhoods cleared.
And Old Man Winter has a third act. What could be a bigger storm Sunday night and Monday. More heavy snow was expected over New England today to add to the heavy snow still on the ground from the last storm. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Man, I got to go up to the mountains. I don't have a sled, but we have those little round things.
Coasters.
Is that what you call coasties? What are they?
Yeah, I think they are
little pans you go down.
Uh-huh.
It's time for a lot of people. The kids must be having a blast. Well, in other news, the United States and Europe are trying to stop the deadly crisis in Ukraine. But what are they using? Diplomacy. And diplomacy doesn't seem to be working. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington.
Pat, a senior State Department official warns that the crisis in eastern Ukraine is, quote, dire. And the official told CNN the fighting on the ground there is getting worse. French and German leaders are taking a new peace initiative to Ukraine and Moscow. And Vice President Biden and Secretary of State John Kerry are in Europe as well. And the U.S. is committing close to $16 million for humanitarian aid. The Obama administration is also considering sending weapons to help Ukraine fight the Russian-backed rebels. Ukrainian leaders say they desperately need adequate weapons to defend themselves. Meanwhile, NATO plans to more than double the size of its response force in Ukraine from 13,000 to 30,000. Pat?
I've said before, Putin is a bit of a sociopath. He's a former KGB guy, and his goal is to restore the former Soviet Union. And therefore, he wants to take back those territories that used to belong to Russia. And he thinks Ukraine is key to it. Now, here's the deal. If we allow this to continue, sooner or later, it's going to reach a crisis proportion. And at that time, it's going to be a shooting war, and we're going to be staring each other with nuclear weapons. That is not a prospect that any of us relish. So what should we do? We should stop dithering, and I don't want to hear any more, well, we're considering sending weapons. Well, big deal. You've been considering it for 2 years. Stop considering and get some supplies over there. The Ukrainians are perfectly capable of defending themselves, but they need ammunition. They need machine guns. They need tanks. They need the kind of weapons to fight a modern war. And if we can send something to them, I think the Russians will back off. But unless we do, we're going to face something really horrible down the road, and that could be developing in the next 5 or 6 months. Well, there's something else happening. We've got an ally in the Middle East who says, I'm not going to get pushed around by that bunch of thugs. Look what happened. John.
That's right, Pat. The King of Jordan is promising what he calls a harsh war against ISIS. The move comes after militants burned a captured Jordanian pilot held in a cage, then released a video of that killing. King Abdullah consulted with military chiefs Wednesday after cutting short his trip here in the States. Jordan is a part of a U.S.-led military alliance that's been bombing militant targets in Syria for nearly 5 months. ISIS fighters are torturing children in Iraq, even burying them alive. According to a report by the United Nations, the Islamic State is systematically killing, torturing, and raping children and families from the Yazidi sect and Christian communities. The UN Committee on the Rights of the Child has received reports of several cases of mass executions of young boys. There are also reports of children being beheaded, crucified, and buried alive. The UN is calling on the Iraqi government to do more to protect children and their families. In a few moments, we'll have a special report on how some women have survived being tortured by ISIS. Pat?
There are barbarians. They are beasts. They're not fit to live in the society of free men and women. They need to be eradicated, not contained, not restrained, but eradicated. And the only way to do it is to have an appropriate military force. Now, we've said before, apparently the president has determined that he's not going to go beyond Iraq. And the inattention by Maliki and his guys in Iraq has caused this disaster. But they can begin to push them back. We must send appropriate arms to the Peshmerga fighters who are capable of resisting ISIS. But what's happened is we send our supplies to the central people at Baghdad, who in turn dither and dally about it and don't send the supplies on to the Peshmerga who need them. So we need to send them direct to Peshmerga. At the same time, we need to open a front in Syria and help those rebels. Now we've got an ally. King Hussein wants to do something. So let's say, all right, Your Majesty, we're here to help you. Here's a whole bunch of stuff. We'll make it at your disposal. We don't have to put our forces over there, except some observers, but we must do something. This president is not doing anything. John.
Here at home, a man who was detained for more than 20 hours by the Transportation Security Administration is suing the agency. Architect Roger Vanderklok said he was arrested in 2013 after asking TSA workers at the Philadelphia airport how to file a complaint. Vanderklok says he then spent nearly a day in a holding cell without being questioned by police or given a chance to call his wife, who was understandably frantic. Vanderklok says he was absolutely terrified. The TSA says it was concerned about what was in his bag, which turned out to be a watch and a power bar wrapped in small pipe for protection. The TSA says those things can be used to make bombs, but Vanderklok's attorney says he doesn't think power bars or watches are consistent with bombings. A Democratic member of the House is pushing to raise the federal tax on gas. He says it's needed to help pay for highways and other government infrastructure projects. But conservatives say that consumers ought to be able to keep the savings from lower gas prices. And as Paul Strand reports, they say raising the gas tax is a bad idea whose time has not yet come.
The sweet relief of plunging prices at the pump. But now the gas is so cheap, some politicians are plotting to raise the federal tax on gasoline from its current 18.4 cents a gallon, figuring drivers might not even notice. Economist Stephen Moore.
People like Nancy Pelosi and Senator Schumer and even some Republicans, regrettably, have said now is, quote, the ideal time to raise the gas tax. I think this is absolutely the worst time to raise the gas tax because consumers have finally gotten a break on their gas prices.
And that's good news because so many households haven't seen their incomes improving much, if at all, in recent years.
Now we're finally getting a break with these lower gas prices. It's something that American consumers and families really need is the break, and Congress wants to tax it away.
Moore points out a hike in gas taxes would deal a real body blow to a recovering economy and the consumers who fuel it.
Every penny of increase in gas tax takes over $1 billion out of the pockets of American consumers.
What's ironic is we were never supposed to have a permanent federal gas tax. It was supposed to be around just long enough to fund building the nation's interstate freeway system. That was a big priority of President Eisenhower's to improve the nation's security. And that was pretty much finished way back in 1969.
It was supposed to expire and sunset when the interstate highway system was completed. And of course, that was now many decades ago, and it's been extended over and over and over again.
Moore hopes the newly empowered Republicans who now control both houses of Congress will be too smart to hike this tax.
If the first thing they were to do in Washington is raise the gas tax on the middle class, I think you would get a revolt among voters saying, what good are these people? We could put them in office to cut our taxes, not to raise them.
Kirpin, who heads up a group that wants to cut big government down to size, thinks the GOP should even go the other way and let the tax automatically die when most of it is set to expire in September of 2016.
We should finally let this be the time that it expires.
Moore agrees.
I would get rid of the federal gas tax altogether, let the states determine what their highest transportation needs are, and let the local people decide where we need the roads, where we need the highways, where we need the bridges, and just get Washington out of the way.
Kirpin says states could do these road and bridge projects better and cheaper.
Without all the federal rules and regulations and strings that come attached with sending our money to Washington so it can run through a huge bureaucracy and be sent back.
If the federal gas tax goes away and states handle it all, taxpayers will probably save around 10 cents a gallon. And most motorists will likely be happier knowing the feds are out of their local decisions about their local highways and bridges. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from Arlington, Virginia.
Thanks, Paul. And Pat, analysts believe an increase in the gas tax doesn't have much of a chance of getting through this Congress.
Well, I would hope not. Now the thing about this gas tax, they say, well, there's a highway trust fund, and the trust fund is running out of money, and we desperately need that trust fund to pay for infrastructure. Okay, that sounds good, doesn't it? There's enough money coming in from the current gas taxes to pay for all of the repair we need in the highways. The problem is that they're using it for all kinds of collateral things like light rail and stuff like that that is never included in the highways. They want to build high-speed trains. They want to build light rail in cities. They want to do all these collateral things and build all kinds of beautification projects. If they took the money and sequestered it and only used it for actual repair and enhancement of the highways, there would be plenty of money for it. Don't fall for the nostrums that they're putting out. They want more money. Bureaucrats are never happy. They'll never be happy to leave a new dollar in your pocket, ever. And we've got to watch that tendency that they have constantly to grow. We need to cut them back instead of let them expand. John?
Pat, in health news, for the first time, lung cancer has passed breast cancer as the leading cause of cancer deaths for women in wealthier developed countries. And the reason is smoking. Lung cancer has been the top cancer killer for men for decades, but more women are dying from lung cancer now because women started smoking more about 3 decades ago, leading to an increase of deaths from that smoking. But in some developed countries, like the U.S., the number of people smoking has leveled off or dropped, and the rate of lung cancer cases is falling. Pat, a little bit of mixed good news and bad news there.
It is. Terry, I used to smoke.
I did years ago.
You did?
Mm-hmm. I did.
How old were you when you started smoking? In college?
13, maybe. No.
That young?
Well, just sneaking, you know.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And occasionally, but when I was in college, I was smoking, and afterwards, when I was singing and clubs and things, it was a smoke-filled environment. You know, in those days, people smoked in restaurants. They smoked in enclosed areas. I mean, it was common.
Well, what is it with women smoking? They think it's fashionable, or they...
Well, I don't think anymore. I mean, I think now it's the odd man out who does it more than the average. I don't. Okay. I think so. I think most people understand the health issues, don't you?
Oh yeah. Well, I was in law school, and we had a guy named Oxner who had been, was a professor at in Tulane, and he had done studies in cancer, and he showed what happened to rats when they put nicotine on them. He showed the tumors that developed in the rats, and I looked at that and I said,
What am I doing?
I am too young to die.
Yes, yeah.
I was in an evidence class in law school, and it was Saturday morning. I mean, I know exactly what it was, and I did like this. This is the last one I'll ever smoke. I ground it out, and I haven't smoked since.
It's not just the person who smokes. Now the reports on secondhand smoke and the ills of that for surrounding people. I mean, I still, when I travel, find that in other parts of the world, people still smoke everywhere.
Well, the cigarette companies have found a fertile field. They're trying to do everything in Indonesia and China and places like that to hook these kids on cigarettes. And they're sufficiently unsophisticated. They don't understand the power of advertising.
Yeah, well, and when you're young, you think you're going to live forever.
Well, yeah, but all the stats show you, and ladies, it's not cool. Whatever those advertisements were, you remember about, yeah, I'm part of the cool generation. Yeah. Don't do it.
A group of Muslims in northern Texas has created what may be the first official Sharia law system in the U.S. The Sharia Tribunal in Irving, Texas says they're not planning to follow the type of Sharia practice in Muslim countries where severe punishments are handed out for even small crimes. Women have very few rights, and blasphemy against Muhammad can result in a death sentence.
In their mind, a misconception about what they see through the media, that Sharia means cut the heads, chop the heads, and cut the hands, and whatever. We are not in that. We are not here to invade White House, to invade Austin.
The imam at the mosque and 3 other Muslim judges will handle cases on their own outside of the Texas courts. They'll deal with issues like divorce and business disputes. Although they say the tribunals will be voluntary, some critics warn that in Britain, the Sharia tribunals developed into a sort of parallel legal system. Texas Republican Congressman Joe Barton won't have the number 666 on a bill that he's sponsoring. Every bill in Congress has a number assigned to it, and Barton's bill that deals with oil got the number 666. But according to The Hill, the congressman's office decided that number had too many, quote, negative connotations. They decided to change it. So now the number is 702. And you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.